Hello, this is Aaron Eggman with Character Formation Coaching, Christian mind-body transformational coaching technique. We're in the Catalyze Character Formation Coaching series, and this is session 6. Last week we covered state 1, disconnected, and we learned how to go from the disconnected state into the connected state. And then today we're going to be focusing on facing and feeling in reality, which is state 2. And as a quick review, at any given moment, the people we are discipling or we ourselves are in one of these 3 states: disconnected, facing and feeling in reality, or connected. And we need to learn to start what's called noticing and tracking which state are we in. Are we able to feel and deal with our emotions, or are we in the, like we talked about last time, the blue zone where we're not able to connect with emotions, or the red zone where there's too many emotions we can't process them? Or are we in the green zone in which we're able to feel and deal and stay present with whatever emotion's coming up? And so we did talk about, as a review, when somebody we're discipling is in the disconnected state, we should be careful not to use verbal villains, and that we could and that we should use the 1, 2, 3s of empathy. And so, real quick, remembering what number 1 is: mirror. Number 2, validate. Number 3, empathize. And I gave you sentence stems of how to do that. And then verbal villains are anything that takes people away from their emotions or tries to make the emotions go away. So instead of making an emotion go away or pushing away from an emotion, what we want to do is to welcome and accept and to go towards that. So that brings us to today's question. So how do we face and feel in reality? We can, number 1, notice, name, and stay with emotions and body sensations. What's really important to understand is that God created our brains to be very complex, and each experience of our lifetime, from the early age, from when we're a baby, are like, every experience is like on what's called a neural network, and that there's memories on a neural network, there's sensations, body sensations, there's emotions, there's thoughts, and all of those things are together. And so when you start to feel a body sensation, there's a lot more to go along with that. There's memories that are coming up for you, but you're not necessarily aware of them. So this happens underneath our conscious awareness, because that's like our downstairs brain works so fast that we're going through so much content, so many things, emotions and sensations and beliefs of our past, that it happens before we even know that it's happening. So it's underneath our conscious awareness. And so by slowing down, noticing, okay, this emotion is coming up, or, oh, I'm feeling this body sensation, I wonder what that is. Being curious, open, accepting, and loving towards it. We can then stay with it and process it, and maybe we can get in touch with some of the memories that are associated with that emotion, or some of the beliefs that are associated with that. And when we're able to get in touch with it, feel it, and deal with it, then we can transformation can occur. So remember earlier on, we talked about the problem is disconnection, and I define disconnection as not being able to feel and deal with emotions, thoughts, or memories that are coming up, right? It's too overwhelming, so we have to push away from it. So that's what happened earlier in our life, and because we couldn't feel and deal with something, we created protective mechanisms, defense mechanisms, or I call them characterological hiding patterns, that protect us and to keep us from feeling and dealing with something that we can't feel and deal with. And so the way that transformational healing occurs is we're able to feel and deal with something that we could not feel and deal with previously, or when we didn't have the resources to do so. So the object now in state 2 is to face and feel, or to feel and deal with an emotion that we could not feel and deal with before. And so noticing, naming, and staying with the emotions, processing whatever comes up, and just staying with it until it naturally shifts and changes, helps do that. And of course, the problem was, we were disconnected from self, but also from relationships and God. So bringing that connection or inviting Christ into the emotions and the sensations is huge. Hey, Lord, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through. Just brutal honesty with him. Be near to me, asking his presence to be near. Awesome. And then also relationally being able to identify, what I need from you is, and then ask for that need to be met in relationship. So we'll talk a little bit more about these two things. So let's first talk about noticing and naming emotions. And so we're going to be diving into the different emotions, but real quick, let me go over the chart. So in state 1, we're not able to feel and deal. And so we're disconnected from God, people, and our spirit-led self. We can use counteractive techniques that try to make the emotions go away before they are processed. And those are any of the counteractive techniques I've talked about that keep us away from heavy, strong emotions. Or we can instead welcome and accept, where we start to we transition from state 1 into state 2, feeling and dealing with reality. And then we stay until this shift. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Our verse here in the state 2 is, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, purifies us from all sin. So what does it mean to live in the light? Well, I personally really interpret this as living transparent, like allowing yourself to live in brutal reality, brutal honesty of your actual reality. So allowing yourself to be exactly where you're at and bringing wherever you're at, exactly where you're at, into relationship with God and people. As you can see, we have the benefit of when we do this deep fellowship connection at a level that we are not used to. So often we don't do this kind of connecting, and so we know we have this strong desire for this deep attachment connection, for this deep connection with people, but then we feel like there's something lacking. And a lot of it has to do with because we're not bringing our vulnerabilities, our weaknesses, our places that we're in process into relationship with people. But as we walk in the light and as we do that, we have a deeper connection with people. And also we get to experience forgiveness. Jesus paid for our sins on the cross, and when we ask him to forgive us, he forgives us. But this is kind of like a present experience of that part of us experiencing that forgiveness in a present moment encounter. So we have living in the light is a powerful experience of connection and forgiveness. And so one of the ways that we can stay with emotions instead of needing to push away from them is to understand emotions, understand why, because often we think we kind of categorize emotions as good emotions and bad emotions. Well, if there's bad emotions, we're never going to feel those bad emotions. And so emotions are not good or bad. They are signals. When you feel and deal with them, they help you to indicate that there's something going on in your life. There's something that you need to process. There's something, and they also have adaptive actions, or they give you information that can help you to respond to life in a positive way. Again, this is when we're able to feel and deal with them. When we're not able to feel and deal with them, all sorts of negative things can happen. And so we got to be careful of making emotions negative. Like, for instance, anger, I would say, is one of the most demonized Christian emotions. Well, that and fear. I'd say fear is probably the most demonized, but anger would be a close second. And so, so many people grow up with parents who, think anger, don't allow their kids to learn how to feel and deal with anger. And because of that, when they start to feel angry, they have to push it away, and then they have to have a characterological hiding pattern or a defense mechanism. And so let's talk about, so what does anger signal, and what is anger's adaptive action tendency? And so anger signals that something I don't like is happening. And the adaptive action tendency of anger is to push back or to say no. And so anger is like our separation muscle. So we're going to talk more about separation coming up, but it's a character structure that's very vital for us to be able to feel, to have built inside of us. And so anger helps us to say, no, I don't like this. And for us to say no, to set a boundary, to be in a place of freedom. So without anger, a person isn't free. And if a person's not free, they're a slave. And if a person's a slave, then they're angry all the time underneath the surface. And so we have to be able to feel and deal with anger, and to know when we're feeling angry, and to be able to process anger in order for us to be able to define who we are, what we like, what we say yes to. And so otherwise, there's like a anger that always is boiling underneath the surface, but you're not aware of it. And so that's the important thing, is when something happens in your life and the appropriate emotion is anger, but you're unable to feel and deal with it, that is going to come out in some way in your life. And so, if you're not feeling it, it's still affecting you. And so it's really important to be able to work to feel and deal with it. So what is sadness? Sadness signals that the loss of something valuable. So something was important to you and you didn't get or didn't experience something that you wanted to experience, or a person, like for instance, if someone's leaving, moving somewhere else, and you really cared about them, it's like you will feel sad. Something that you desired that didn't happen, or something that you, and so it's a loss of something valuable. The adaptive action tendency is to grieve. And grief is very powerful, because in order for our brain to allow something new in our life, we have to be able to grieve. If we are unable to feel that sadness associated with something that we should feel sad in, or our brain gets stuck and is unable to move on, you're not free to move on to the next thing. Like for instance, we all know of the person who had a family member die, and then like 10 years later, they're still feeling so much unregulated grief. So that's grief that hasn't been felt and dealt with. Grief that is felt and dealt with, it might come up for, I'd say, probably a year. You'll probably feel it come up. But if you slow down and feel it and really just allow it to be, and just think about how valuable that person was and how sad it is that they're not in your life anymore, then that grief will, it won't last forever. It won't be stuck in your brain in the wrong place. But grief allows information to go from one part of our brain, our short-term storage, to our long-term filing cabinet in our brain. And when it's not long-term filing cabinet, now we're able to love somebody else. We're able to love the next thing. But it's not like we're betraying the old. It's like now we're free to experience the new. And so grief is so vital. And when we grieve, we're freed up. What is fear signal? Fear, so often there's that model, I think it's the supernatural model, where they say the root of all problems is fear. And they kind of, often that model will define fear as false evidence appearing real. And that honestly does such a huge disservice to people, because then we always think that fear is this like horrible force, and so no one ever allows themselves to feel fear, and so we all have like unregulated fear that we're always having to always having to counteract, and it never like gets processed. So fear is not false evidence appearing real, and I wanted to kind of say that very strongly, because fear actually, if we understood where that fear was coming up from inside of you, there would be a memory, sensations, emotions that are tied to that fear network. And if we understood those experiences, then your fear would make total sense. So it's not false. It's actually real. Like, you're experiencing something, like, and if we understood it, it would make sense. And so fear signals that a situation is unsafe. And the adaptive action tendency of fear is to flee to safety. And what happens when we don't feel and deal with fear? Again, chronic fear, or there's phobias that result, not from extreme, but it could also just simply be that we feel an underlying anxiety instead of actually knowing what we're feeling, or even worse is you don't know when you're in an unsafe environment, then you're more susceptible to abuse and victimization because you don't know that you're unsafe. I know I was observing somebody the other day, and this person was like way too close to their, like, invading their space, but the person wasn't allowed to, like, I know the person, and they're not okay with the emotion fear. They had that model where fear is a bad thing, but it's like, oh my gosh, like they were getting they were unsafe as far as, like, the person was almost touching their private parts and stuff. And so they didn't even feel fear, so they didn't decide to act, like allow that fear to help them to flee to safety, take a step back. And so, and another thing is, like, if we can't feel fear, then we don't, like, people around us are susceptible to abuse too, or victimization, or dangerous things happening to them. So it's so important that we're able to feel and deal with the emotion fear, so that we can keep ourselves safe and those around us, our loved ones, safe. Disgust. So what is disgust, and what does that signal, and what does it mean when you feel disgust? So disgust signals that you've been contaminated, and often this happens, the emotion disgust, when you're feeling invaded, when you're feeling, when there's abuse, neglect involved, when there's something contaminating, something that's like toxic, then you can feel contaminated. And the disgust adaptive action tendency is to expel the contaminant. Ew, gross, ugh, like to get it out, to expel. And so when things happen and we feel poisoned, in a sense, so disgust you could also say that you're being poisoned, and it's feeling and dealing with that emotion can help us to deal with the times when poisonous things did happen, or contaminating things did happen. We're able to, like, expel it. Now we're on joy. And so joy signals that something is pleasurable. And the adaptive action tendency of joy is to play or to celebrate someone or something. And what's really important to know about positive emotions is, for some people, they can only feel positive and they have a hard time feeling negative. That's a problem, because those negative emotions are coming out in their life in some way, maybe, But then also it's important to know that when some people start to feel positive emotions, they have such a hard time feeling the positive emotions. They think they're feeling something negative when really it's something positive. They just don't know how to regulate the positive emotion. I was working with an individual in which they had, they were going to get something in their life. They were going on a vacation, and they were so excited about the vacation, but they kept getting sick to their stomach and not feeling good. They couldn't. But when I was in session with them, I attuned to their excitement about going on the vacation, and they were able to feel and deal with it. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, that sick to my stomach was actually excitement. I just didn't know how to regulate it." It was like this sensation they didn't know how to feel with, and that happens because when a kid is feeling joy and they're feeling so much positive emotions, if parents aren't okay with the emotion, positive emotions, joy, then they'll, like, shut down. Like, for instance, a kid does something that he's proud of, and he's, like, walking around, his chest is poked out, and he's feeling pride of his accomplishment. And if a parent, at that point kind of, like, crushes them and say, "Hey, don't be so prideful," or "Pride comes before fall," or or something. It's like the deflation of that positive emotion, and then the deflating experience now gets paired to that positive. And so when they're feeling like they accomplish something, they can't just enjoy it and celebrate it and to feel it. And instead, the deflation comes with it. And so learning to emotionally regulate and to feel positives is extremely important. And if you're unable to feel positive emotions and stay with it and to feel there's so much energy when you're talking about positive emotions. There's tingles, there's like electricity, there's like a warmth and an upward spiraling sensations that occur and happen. And so, that is quite important to be able to feel and deal with. And so, all right, let's go to excitement. And this also includes sexual excitement. So what does excitement signal? Excitement signals that something good is about to happen. And notice the difference between joy. Joy is something good is happening. Excitement is something good is about to happen, it's going to happen. And the adaptive action tendency is to move towards it or to move towards someone. And so excitement, again, it's really important to feel, and especially when we start talking about like sexual excitement, when we don't know how to process that, especially like earlier on, like when we're young, maybe let's talk about sexual excitement. And we like for me, like my brother showed me pornography at an early age, and like I felt excited about it, and I should, because that's the right, like when we're created to respond physically and embodily when we see that kind of stuff. And so it was right for me to get excited, because that's, God wired us to get excited. That means I'm working right. But of course, I also felt disgust because I was being contaminated. So I felt both excitement and disgust. And so those two emotions paired in my brain, so that later on when I got married and I was feeling that excitement in sexual excitement arena, I would feel that disgust on that same, and that led to some issues. And I did go into counseling and was able to deal with that, but that led to some dysfunction inside. And so being able to allow yourself to feel the excitement and then unpairing it from the negative emotion is where that work really lies with excitement. Here's a cool little chart. I got this from Lindsay Brahman. I purchased it for these groups. So since you're a part of these groups, you can use this. If you're not part of my groups, please get onto Lindsay Brahman's website and buy this chart from her, because it's a copyrighted, but it's a cool chart, and I like how it has the body sensations on the outside, the emotions on the inside. So, all right. So we talked about how to feeling and dealing, and it's so important for us to know the value of all emotion, of feeling and dealing all emotions, so that we want to feel and deal with them. If we don't have a value for certain emotions, we won't feel and deal with them, and then they'll come out another way. And then sometimes we can ourselves get curious of accepting and loving, and see what's coming up for us and stay with it and process it. Us, or inviting Christ into it, we can do it. But sometimes, and it's difficult to do. And so that's where we have these, we talked about the green zone, and our green zone, feeling and dealing zone of feeling and dealing, is bigger with two people than it is with one person, because now we have we're able to feel and deal at a greater level because the other person is with us, and their ability to feel and deal is combined with ours, and so we can feel and deal more. And so because of that, we want to have people in our life in which we can process life with. And learning how to utilize those relationships is important. And so this is like a little thing is what I need from you is, and then to insert your need. So this is quadrant 1 needs. Quadrant 1 needs are high grace needs. And I would default to asking for these. We're used to asking for the others, but I would default to asking for these. But if you know you need one of the others, then great, go for it, ask for that. But if I were you, I would first check this list and ask for one of these needs to be met, because these are where we often don't know how to get this met. Judgment, attunement, respond to what the other is experiencing, get in there well. Validation, convey a person's experience, is significant, not to be dismissed. Identification, share your story. Similar story, again, keeping it 30 seconds or less, so that the conversation stays about the other person. Containment is allowing strong emotions, or allow a person to vent while staying warm without reacting, just holding strong emotions, staying with them, and not needing to push away. Comforting, providing support for someone's loss. This is on the encouragement side, or conveying the good, quadrant 2. Affirmation, draw attention to the good. Encouragement, convey that you believe in someone's ability to do the difficult. Respect, assign value. Hope, provide reality-based confidence in the future. Forgiveness, cancel a debt. Celebration, acknowledge a win, both cognitively and emotionally. Feel the joy with someone when they're feeling joy. Stay with it. That's huge. We're getting now more on the high truth end of things. So this is about provide reality, bring clarification, bring order to chaos, perspective, offer a different viewpoint, insight, convey a deeper understanding, feedback, give a personal response, kind of confrontation, face someone with an appeal to change. And then 4, this is the highest truth intervention, is a call to action. Advice, recommend an action step. Structure, provide a framework. Challenge, strongly recommend a difficult action. Development, create a growth environment. And service, guide, encouragement to giving back. All of these are very important. We need people in our lives who can provide all of these relational resources. All right, and so as we name and notice and stay with, in other words, let whatever sensations or emotions or memories or thoughts, beliefs are associated with something that comes up inside of us, stay with it and feel and deal what we could not feel and deal with before. There's a shift, and we go from state 2 into state 3, which we'll talk about next time. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. You can email me at formationcoaching@gmail.com. All right, thanks for joining me today.